Deshaun Watson, biggest story today. The Houston Texans, last time I checked, I have not yet been drawn into litigation. You have not yet been drawn into litigation. That group continues to shrink. Deshaun Watson, today the Houston Texans become a defendant. And this has been coming. Houston attorney Tony Busby had talked about this before, adding the Texans to the slate of litigation involving Deshaun Watson. Essentially what Tony Busby did today, he came out, filed a suit, and said, hey, the Texans should have known about the behavior of Deshaun Watson. And the first thing I want to ask you, Jim, you and I are very familiar with the entire orbit of this case. Do you think the Texans, given the multitude of time that we've talked about, the expansive time, the number of civil suits that have been filed, the allegations that have put forth, do you think the Houston Texans should have known about this? Is there merit here?
Yeah, I definitely believe there's merit here. The question you have to ask yourself, Charles, is do you believe in coincidence? And is it a coincidence that all of these things are coming out about the Houston Texans after Deshaun decided that he no longer wanted to play for the Houston Texans? Look, when you set up a room for him to have these massages outside of the organization, when someone from the organization hits him to non-disclosure agreements and then has him present those to the women that he is bringing in to give him these massages, yeah, the organization, I believe, knew something. And the fact that in this filing, it says that the organization was made aware of some of the things that were, what's the word I should use here? Not necessarily professional behavior. Then yes, I believe the organization did have at least some inkling of what was going on.
Yeah, and that's really the biggest piece of news, I think, if we look at this now, is that essentially you have an attorney and Tony Busby who's saying, look, they were made aware. We've gone through some depositions in some of these civil suits, and there's an outside contractor with the Houston Texans, the Genuine Touch spa, okay, that was supposed to be contracted, handle the massages that Houston Texans players would be seeking outside of the organization. Obviously, remember, this is during the pandemic. The organization's worried about COVID, so they contract with this outside, essentially a massage spa, and someone from the massage spa, the owner of the massage spa, according to this lawsuit, went to the Texans and said, hey, there's some things going on here. Like Deshaun Watson, and this is the allegation, one of the key claims in the suit, Deshaun is seeking out strangers from Instagram, not necessarily massage therapists, to get these massages. And essentially, you got Tony Busby saying, look, that's the first red flag that the Texans are now alerted to. There's something going on, some behavior outside of the norm here, and the Texans really should have investigated that. And I think that's what we're going to start to get to, is should the Texans have started to investigate more of the behavior going on with Deshaun Watson? You spoke to it. He had a suite that was set up at the Houstonian Hotel. Also in this lawsuit, there's claims that the team trainer was told, hey, there's a lot of women showing up to the suite when Deshaun's there. And again, I'm paraphrasing here. You know, I wouldn't say that this is necessarily a complaint, but it was definitely something that the Texans were put on notice of. And then the NDA. The NDA gets provided to Deshaun Watson after he comes, allegedly, you know, something that's been laid out in the depositions, says, hey, I'm getting information put out there by this individual. I don't know what to do about this. So team security provides him an NDA. And soon after, there's an allegation that Deshaun Watson starts to try to use that NDA in massages. It's hard to look at this situation and not think that the Texans somehow are going to be drawn deeper into this. This feels like there's some element of argumentative merit here.
Yeah, it sounds like they were uncomfortable, or they were okay with this as long as Deshaun Watson was their starting quarterback and helping them win games. And that's what feels so grimy about this whole thing as it relates to the Houston Texans. Look, I've tried to stay out of this case because we have not, or I have not, actually seen the evidence. We know the allegations that are out there and whatnot, but just based on the fact of what we do know, I will say this: Deshaun Watson appears to have a problem, and whether he wants to admit it, whether the team wants to admit it, whether his handlers want to admit it, the fact that you would go out and seek so many women for a massage, and many of them were not licensed, and you're circumventing all of the things that the organization, meaning the Houston Texans, had set up for players to receive treatment, it does not speak well for him. And it's truly troubling if you, for instance, watch that HBO Real Sports interview and you see one of the women talk about her experience. And there's no way you can watch that, or there's no way that I could watch that and say that that woman was not affected in some way, in a traumatic way. And so for me, it's a truly troubling case. And it's sort of reflective to me that, again, talent will buy you a lot of leeway in terms of what you can get away with. And Deshaun Watson, in my opinion, based on what I have seen and what I have read and what I have heard, I believe that he has a problem. And I believe that discipline is in order.
Well, you bring up discipline. This really wasn't even the biggest news of the week. I mean, going back to Saturday, the Wall Street Journal reports that, hey, the league's going to seek a 1 year, at minimum, 1 year suspension that's open-ended. Essentially, seek a 1 year suspension, at which point Deshaun Watson would have to apply for reinstatement to the league. What's interesting about this is, and you and I had a chance to talk about this prior to the show. You and I were on the phone over the weekend talking a little bit. And on Friday, I had a chance to talk to a few people that were involved in the orbit of this thing. And I had heard from the league side that, yeah, a year was definitely in play. That kind of seemed like the basement, the sort of ground floor level where this would begin. And I reached out to someone within the union and I said, hey, this is interesting that this year really seems to be getting out there. And the response I got was, well, yeah, the league wants this out here. This is me paraphrasing the source I was talking to. He said, look, the league wants this out there because this is going to go to an independent arbitrator on Tuesday. It's another piece of information that's come out. This is the crossroads that Deshaun Watson, the Cleveland Browns, in some way the NFL is also involved in this week. And the source said, look, the league wants this out here because they can say, well, we're seeking a calendar year suspension. Now, if this independent arbitrator comes back and says, I've looked at the evidence, Sue Robinson, former federal judge, sat on the bench in that position for more than 2 decades, comes out and says, I think maybe this is a 10-game suspension. I don't know that the optics of that would be something that people outwardly would be happy with, but leaking that 1 year suspension expectation gives the NFL the opportunity to later say, well, she's saying 10 games, we're going to leave it how it is, but we really wanted it to be a year. You feel like this is kind of the league trying to have its cake and eat it too with Watson and the suspension?
Charles, you know this better than anyone, how the NFL operates. Whenever there is an issue of consequence involved, where the PR is going to be significant, what does the NFL do? It puts its finger up in the air and it checks to see which way public opinion is blowing. And then typically it will make a decision based on that. To me, this is the same thing. This is knowing how sensitive this is, that the league got it wrong when it came to the Ray Rice case, that it got it wrong in some other cases as it related to issues involving women. And so now it wants to put out and show that it is going to be tough on this type of behavior, and here's what it wants to do. And just as you said, it gives them cover now if the arbiter comes back and offers something less than a full season. Now, you know this as well as I do. The league can always appeal that decision. And if it appeals that decision, who does it go to? It goes to the commissioner. So that's what I would watch here. If the arbiter comes back with something less than a year, will the NFL appeal that and seek a longer suspension? And that will tell us everything we need to know about how they view this case seriously, and not just in terms of public opinion.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the appeal too, because that's a really big part of this that I don't think people really understand, that this independent disciplinary officer, discipline in the NFL for the longest time has been this behind the scenes battleground between the union and the NFL. And the message you always got from the union is the system's unfair. Roger Goodell is unilaterally deciding punishment. Something needs to be fixed here. So they hammer out a new CBA and they decide, hey, we're jointly going to agree and pay a third party to become someone who gets in the middle of this and finds the middle ground, the correct middle ground, can lay out a judgment that we both feel like, okay, that's fair. Sue Robinson, this former federal judge, becomes that individual. Now, what's interesting here now is if the NFL appeals it. So say Sue Robinson comes back and says, yeah, I see personal conduct violations. I think it amounts to, say, a 10-game suspension. The NFL's already leaked it out there. We think it's a calendar year, which would be 17 games plus postseason if the Browns were able to make it the postseason. If they were to then appeal at that point, what is the NFL then saying about a process it just set up? And what would they be saying about Sue Robinson, who, given the fact that she sat in a post, in a federal post, the bench that spanned over 5 different presidential administrations, she's got credentials, for the NFL then to go, no, we think you got it wrong. Your first case, the first time you've had really a case under this new system, a very important case, we think you got that wrong. Isn't the NFL then automatically voiding this new system that it just set up?
Yes, but I also believe, as you said, as you outlined earlier, I don't believe the NFL will appeal it. I think this is giving them cover to say, this is what the independent arbiter said, who, by the way, just happens to be a woman, and she decided on, let's say, 10 games, and they're going to stand behind that, I believe, and then be able to say that we believed that it should have been longer. Now, should they go the other route? Look, you know me, Charles. I always believe that you stand on principle. And if you believe that what Deshaun Watson is alleged to have done actually took place, then stand on principle and do what you feel is right. And don't hide behind the arbiter. That's the way I feel about it.
What do you think now, given that we now know where the league stands? Okay, they want a year. They want a calendar year. Taking it away from the front office of the Cleveland Browns, taking it away from what's at stake for this decision that they made. And that's something that hopefully you and I will be able to talk about.
Hang on one sec here. Like, when you talk about the Cleveland Browns front office, I feel like I have to say this, that I'm extremely disappointed in Andrew Berry and in the Cleveland Browns front office. From this standpoint, the way that this investigation was handled, that so much information has come out after the fact, I would be more accepting if the Browns had just said publicly, you know what, we're here to win games. Deshaun Watson is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. We got a chance to get him. That's what we did. As opposed to hiding behind, we hired a third-party investigator who he or she did their due diligence, and we came away comfortable with this process. Look, the reality here is that the Cleveland Browns signed Kareem Hunt after he was caught on videotape, actually kicking a woman. So don't sit up and tell me that you're all about protecting women and you have concern about this, etc. The bottom line in the NFL is winning football games. And I'm just saying, not that I would have agreed with it, but it would have been much more tolerable to me if they had just been honest and said, we're here to win football games, and that's why we went after Deshaun Watson the way we did.
You don't think, though, that there's any illusions, anyone who was involved in this process, Andrew Berry, the general manager, Paul D. Podesta, who's the chief strategist, Jimmy and Dee Haslam, obviously the owners, Kevin Stefanski, the head coach. I can't believe anyone in that organization is now looking at this and feeling like it went any differently than they thought it could. I have to feel like before this, the trade goes down, before the money is handed over to Deshaun Watson in a deal that will shape the NFL moving forward, I have to think all, the front office, the coaching staff, ownership has to sit there and go, this is staple to us for good. So it's going to have to work out. It's going to have to not only work out on the football field, but there's going to have to be some element of resolution or moving forward or growth or something that has to happen with him off the field as well. Or ultimately, they're going to carry this with them moving forward, no matter how successful they are. Ultimately, this decision, I don't think any individual who was involved in that brain trust can just walk away from it, ever.
I disagree. I think the NFL has taught us, as long as you win football games, to the general public, and I'm not in any way saying to everyone, but I think to the general public, it doesn't matter. People just want their football. They want their team to win. And if the Browns do win, and let's say they go on to win a Super Bowl with Deshaun Watson at quarterback, I don't see it hurting the bottom line. I just don't. And maybe that's me being jaded from all these years covering the league. But what do we like to say about the NFL? It's a Teflon league, and nothing sticks to it for very long. And so in that case, I think you're right. I believe the Browns knew that there would be fallout from this. but clearly they were comfortable enough with that potential fallout, to go down this road. And here's the thing that is even more disturbing, Charles. So you want to go down this road, you not only go down it, but then you guarantee the entirety of the contract, which it just doesn't feel right. It just doesn't feel right in this climate. Why couldn't they have waited a year? You know, let Deshaun play for a year. And I know why, because his representation wanted the new contract. But why not wait a year, let some of this die down, let him play, win games, and then decide to redo the contract and guarantee it? It just doesn't feel right. It just doesn't feel right to me.
Well, we'd be kidding ourselves. I mean, come on, let's be honest here. Everything that happened was what had to happen for Cleveland to land Deshaun Watson. The contract had to be what it was. Absolutely. I mean, the draft picks, everything, the totality of the package, which was mind-blowing, had to be what it was so that the Cleveland Browns could, essentially feel like they've wrangled in a potential top 5 quarterback for at least the length of that deal. Something interesting, though, about the NFL and how they may be approaching this suspension, and, it's gotten buried, but it could become a big factor, I think, for Deshaun Watson financially. If he ends up being suspended for a calendar year, his contract tolls, okay? That means that this deal that they signed actually doesn't begin until after the 2022 season. The reason why that's important, he would have made $1 million this season, right, in base salary, and then he starts earning that $40 million plus each year guaranteed afterward, right? Well, now you toll it a year, and he's earning $1 million base next year, and you've effectively removed 1 year of $40 million plus salary. It's really hard to make that up in the aggregate over the length of your career. Once that money is gone and that contract tolls, that's a heck of a price that he would pay financially on top of the suspension.
Yeah, but I guess I would look at it another way too. He's going to make so much money, and I'm not saying in any way minimizing what $40 million is, but he's going to make so much money. It's not going to hurt his quality of life or his kids' quality of life when he has a family, or even their kids' quality of life. So Deshaun Watson is not going to be hurting financially, regardless of what happens here. Again, I don't know, Charles. We hear teams talk about the importance of character and the importance of culture. And then once again, what happens? They find a player who has a unique talent, an elite level talent, and they go down that road and say, you know what? Character matters and culture matters, but only so much as it relates to having, someone who plays the most important position on a field that we can lock up and hopefully win championships. And maybe that's on me. Every time, in many of these cases, I hold out hope that when someone says character matters, they mean it. But in this case, Deshaun Watson, you don't go out and seek women on Instagram who are not even licensed massage therapists and go into a room with a hand towel and ask me to believe that you were there for a therapeutic massage. You just don't. And if your sexual proclivities is that this is what you want to do, then go to parties who are interested in doing that with you, not to parties who are there as true professionals. Because again, when I see these women talk about it and you see the trauma in their eyes and you hear it in their voice, I just can't get that out of my head. I just can't. And I can't stop thinking about the fact that I have daughters. And what if my daughter had been one of those massage therapists who had gone in that room thinking that she was actually going to provide a service in terms of a therapeutic massage, and now I got some guy putting his junk on her and trying to get her to do things that she doesn't want to do. And to me, what this speaks to in some ways, Charles, being honest here, is that it feels like this is that old adage about power and privilege. And Deshaun Watson, to me, in this case, comes off as someone in a position of power and privilege who feels that therefore gives him the right to have control over not only this woman's body, but also her livelihood. And that just doesn't sit well with me.
Hey, thanks for watching Brother from Another on YouTube. Make sure you hit subscribe before you leave, and be sure to watch us 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Peacock. Appreciate you.